This is an ITG special presentation.
On this edition of ITG, how did it all begin? To appreciate where Rich Rod's offensive scheme is, where it's been, and maybe even where it will go, it might help to understand how it started, what it is, and what it isn't. That's what we'll be exploring on this episode of In the Gun.
I'm kind of a football junkie. I try to learn something every day.
This play is a classic zone read out of a spread formation.
This offense, the origination of it was actually the run and shoot.
You fly around and play fast.
His passer rating set an NCAA record.
I'll show you who's in command. Woody Densler.
To try to stretch the field both horizontally and vertically.
Slayton inside the 20, he's gone. Touchdown, West Virginia.
You'll be mentally and physically tougher than anybody you play, or you won't be playing.
Leaps for the touchdown. The nation's leading rusher.
That's tempo in the run game. That's Rich Rodriguez.
To the house.
And last, and most importantly, be physical. Be physical.
You got to Glenville State, this is where you develop the notion of the spread offense. And I'm not sure how many people really truly understand how much you basically revolutionized college football. I don't think you were setting out to do that.
So we put this kind of run and shoot in, but I had a shorter quarterback, only about 5'10", 5'11", but he could throw it. He was real smart. And we're getting ready to play Indiana State, which is a 1AA. That was a big money game for us. They were paying us like $40,000, and we were going to get killed in this. So I said, you know what? We're going to go in a shotgun, and we're going to run everything out of a shotgun, and we're going to do everything at a 2-minute drill pace because I thought that was the hardest thing to defend on defense, the 2-minute drill. And I said, we're just going to do that and just chuck the ball around a little bit and see what happens. So we go out there and we lose 63-49, but we put up like almost 600 yards. And they were so mad. Their coach was so mad he wouldn't even shake my hand after the game, even though they won, because we had this little school putting all these yards at it. And I told the staff after the game, I said, boy, I'm disappointed that we lost, but I think we found something. I said, if you can find a quarterback, get you some skilled players in space, get 5 chubby guys to get run over slowly up front of the O-line, we got a shot.
Yeah, we had a shot, all right. Anybody that was around Glenville back in those days can tell you that. Sure, you remember as Mountaineer fans, Steve Slayton hitting pay dirt 6 times against Louisville back in 2005. You can probably tell me your seat number and how many wings you ate before the game. And you know Pat White shredded Big East defenses for a gazillion yards. You're probably correcting me right now. Actually, Jed, it was a little over 10,000 yards and 103 touchdowns. But how well do you really know the scheme and the output from it that Rich Rodriguez is bringing back to Morgantown? From a relentless rushing attack that pushes, punches, and claws to a passing game that tests defenses when they nibble up to slow down that run game, the offense you'll see this fall at Mountaineer Field will have some obvious similarities you might recognize to Rich Rodriguez's last run at West Virginia nearly 2 decades ago, but the changes he's continued to make to the system since first deploying it more than 30 years ago at Glenville State are significant. So significant, in fact, that some of it's difficult to recognize even for those of us who were there way back when Coach Rod first inserted the key into the ignition and fired it up. From tight ends, blocking backs, and new kinds of tempo to, in many cases, words replacing numbers. Rich has added 34 years' worth of wrinkles, but the bones of his offense are still the bones of his offense. At the end of practice one day this spring, I had a chance to catch up with Rashid and Pat behind the south end zone. See, sometimes when we cross paths, it's fun to compare notes about our experiences running Rich's offense through the years. It's kind of a round table of aged-out quarterbacks who appreciate the evolution of the system that we're all proud to call our own. Well, that particular day, Sheed was telling Pat about something I had texted him a while back. They were call sheets and testing info from a game we played against West Virginia State back in the early 90s. They were in Rich's handwriting, as all that stuff was in those early days. A reporter had actually hung on to them from a story she did way back when and tagged me with them in a post on X in December when it was announced that Rich was coming back to WVU. I had a blast reading through them, so I sent them on to Sheed knowing he'd appreciate a glance too. Well, Pat Rashid and I talked about the things that had changed since what was included on that call sheet, but we also marveled at the things that stood the test of time. That game plan, 3 decades old, included language and phrases like indie, wide choice F sneak, rip max, things that might sound like Klingon to outsiders, but were still music to our ears. The thing is, if you were fluent in the dialect of the offense back then, as quarterbacks of course are, you can still, kind of sort at least, find a way to speak it or to some degree understand a lot of it, even today. It's kind of like having a conversation with a Gen Zer.
Fam comes slipping in with their dripping swag, jamming to some sick bop.
You both speak English, but not really. All right, time for some quick housekeeping. If you enjoy our content, please hit the like button and subscribe. The YouTube algorithm really likes that and it helps us out. But also, give a nod to our sponsors and do business with the folks who do business with us. That, of course, includes J.R. Toothman and our friends at Toothman Ford in Grafton. We all know that cars cost less in Grafton. Let's also give a tip of the ITG cap to Fortis and our buddy Rick Lewis. For roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed, be sure to visit fortis.us.com. And of course, this is also a great time for a shout out to Tim Johnston and our friends at Johnston Equipment on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. Coach Rod's offense, sometimes referred to as the power spread because of its famously physical disposition, despite being run from a series of formations that often spread the field, actually has its roots in the old Mouse Davis run and shoot scheme. These days, when some people hear the word spread, their mind often goes not to the run and shoot, but straight to the air raid offense that has become so pervasive across modern college football. An offense that was spawned at BYU by LaBelle Edwards and refined by Hal Mumme and Mike Leach, of course, at Iowa Wesleyan and beyond. But the system Coach Rod has spent more than 3 decades refining didn't take root as an air raid offense. Through the years, people would see 4 receiver sets and jump to assumptions that these offenses were pretty much the same. That's not true. The run and shoot and air raid aren't 2 branches of the same spread offense tree. To the contrary, they represent 2 different trees entirely. There are parallels between these 2 systems, but at their core are some critical differences. The run and shoot is fueled by option routes that force heavy communication by the defense, while the air raid is heavily predicated on the quarterback working his way through a set of route combinations that tend to have an answer against any coverage. The air raid, of course, is a scheme very familiar to West Virginia fans. Not only was it the system of choice of both Neil Brown and Dana Holgorsen, both Mike Leach disciples, but it's also a system that West Virginia defensively has been forced to contend with really since joining the Big 12 back in 2012, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Just look across the landscape of the Big 12. Arizona just brought in former Red Raiders quarterback Seth Dagey as its new offensive coordinator this offseason, and they'll be installing the air raid in Tucson. Jake Spavital, West Virginia fans know him well. Jake is about as air raidy as they come. He returns this year to run Dave Aranda's offense at Baylor. TCU, of course, has air raid roots at multiple turns, including head coach Sonny Dykes, who was on staff in Lubbock with Mike Leach at Texas Tech. And even the Frogs offensive coordinator Kendall Briles, also an air raid guy. Air raid influences, of course, are a constant in Mike Gundy's Oklahoma State offense, remaining from years past when guys like Todd Monken and Dana Holgorsen held down the OC post in Stillwater. Even Utah's Kyle Whittingham jumped into the air raid business this offseason with the acquisition of offensive coordinator Jason Beck from Syracuse, so they will be installing it as well. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but sit tight because when we come back, we're going to take a look at the pass-happy run-and-shoot scheme that served as the foundation of Rich Rodriguez's offense. You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
At Coyote, we're going to treat you like dirt. Because we hold dirt in the highest regard. We're honored to find it under our fingernails. It keeps us humble, honest. If you know us, you know getting treated like dirt means getting treated with respect. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing or a free loader with low-rate financing on select Coyote models in stock.
Come check out our new Coyotes at Johnston Equipment.
You're listening to Mountaineer Football Talk.
ITG.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
So we've established that the Rich Rodriguez offense you'll see this fall on Mountaineer Field for the first time since 2007 was planted decades ago with a run-and-shoot seed. So what is that? And where did it come from? The run-and-shoot offense, mastered by Mouse Davis at Portland State in the late 1970s, was actually the brainchild of Tiger Ellison. Necessity is the mother of invention, and Ellison was a high school coach in Ohio who, in the 50s and 60s, devised a wildly unorthodox lonesome polecat offense to bring some fun back to the game for his players and, more importantly, to change the fortunes of his struggling and overmatched Middletown high school team. Ellison installed a wildly unconventional system that spread the defense with an irregular formation. The center was alone over the ball, the entire offensive line far to the left, and he had two receivers split far right. And it divided the field into specific areas that could be systematically attacked. He used a lot of pre-snap motion and took advantage of now screens, bingo screens, some people call them, thrown immediately after the snap to receivers left unattended by the defense. In other words, if the defense doesn't match heads, they leave somebody uncovered, he would immediately take the snap and hit the open or uncovered receiver. Perhaps most critical to all this was that Tiger Ellison's new system would be heavily predicated on choice routes, in which receivers, to get open, would be equipped with various choices, as the name suggests. They'd react to what the defense did after the snap. These weren't the traditional static pass patterns drawn up in the playbook, but rather routes that left countless options open to the pass catcher on the run, contingent on the area the defense left open as they dropped into coverage. Instead of being told to sprint 10 yards upfield and break sharply right or left, no matter what a defense did, a receiver might be coached to sprint upfield to a landmark, then break toward open grass in the opposite direction of the nearest defender. In the parlance of drawing up plays on the board, this meant the offense always had the chalk last. Versions of these choice routes are, of course, deployed by every offense in the country today. That's very common. That's a mainstream part of football at every level. But in 1958, this was revolutionary. Now, the next year, Ellison streamlined the madness of this offense with a more manageable formation that simply featured double wingbacks and receivers split wide to each side. This alignment was much more akin to the spread formations that we see on a weekly basis in college football and even in the NFL today. But the choice routes and the aggressive nature that he initially installed in the offense, those were holdovers. Those remained when Tiger Ellison revisited and made the changes to the offense that second year. So how did Mouse Davis become the name most coaches have come to associate with the run and shoot? Well, in the mid-1960s, a decade before becoming head coach at Portland State in Oregon, Mouse was exposed to Tiger Ellison's book, Run and Shoot Football, Offense of the Future, at a coaching clinic. And Mouse was immediately inspired, especially by the use of multiple receiver sets, the constantly moving launch point of the quarterback, making it more difficult for the defense to get a bead on the quarterback. And he loved the adaptable pass routes designed to attack the reaction of a defense. Mouse modified the system over the next several years to make it his own, and the rest, it's kind of history. The football gods knew the game had changed forever when Portland State's Neil Lomax, playing for Mouse Davis, threw 7 touchdowns in the first quarter of a blowout win, 105-0 blowout win over Delaware State in 1980. That was a harbinger of things to come as Mouse Davis's run-and-shoot offense rewrote the record book at multiple stops before he helped Jim Kelly and the Houston Gamblers carve up the USFL and ultimately took his wide-open scheme to the world's biggest stage in the National Football League. In Houston, Jim Kelly had a mouse, but in the Ville, we had a rat. That summer of 1991 at Glenville State, when Coach Rod abandoned the Florida State multiple eye offense that he'd run his first season at GSC to install a more aggressive no-huddle spread system, our bridge to the run-and-shoot world was Coach Mike Springston, an inductee earlier this year, in fact, in the West Virginia Tech Hall of Fame. Rat Springston, as he was affectionately known to at least a few of his peers, was a former West Virginia Conference quarterback, a high school head coach, and college assistant who had helped implement the scheme at previous stops, including at UTEP in 1989 for a minors team that featured a quarterback, Howard Gasser, who went on to sign with the Seattle Seahawks as an undrafted free agent. Coach Springston was a lot of things, a pastor, a teacher, and an innovator, but he was also the unheralded assistant who helped bring the offense of the future to the Ville of the early 90s. 1991 was Rich's second year in Glenville, and it was the first for a lot of us on the team who were transferring in from points far and wide. The Pioneer program, with one of the lowest budgets in the nation, was still hoping to recover from its worst decade ever in the 1980s. Coach Rod recognized that he'd barely put a dent in this colossal task in front of him, trying to overhaul a Glenville State squad that had won just 2 games in 2 years, including 7 shutout losses in its last 18 games. That's right, Glenville had been blanked on the scoreboard 7 times in its previous 18 games heading into the 91 season. There was literally nothing left to lose. By that point, returning to a more traditional offense might have seemed like coaching malpractice. Instead, Rich burned the boats and forged ahead with the high-flying run and shoot. All the chips were down, and we didn't know what was going to happen next. But we had a hunch it wouldn't be boring. And that is exactly what we'll unpack for you in the next installment of this series on Coach Rod's offense. Until then, be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. For Wesley Uhler, Owen Schmitt, and Schuyler Callihan, I'm Jed Drenning. You've been In the Gun.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.